Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Consider checking out the Teach the Geek to Speak Society. It's a monthly membership geared towards STEM professionals. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Ciaran Phillip. He's a forensic scientist who does science communication. I mean, how many of those types are walking around? I don't know any. He's the only one that I know. I'm interested to learn more about his motivation to become a forensic scientist, the genesis of his business, Sure Science Consulting, and also his work with the Canadian Multicultural Inventors Museum. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Ciaran.
Thanks a lot, Neil. I've always wanted to be here. Really admire your work. So I'm happy to be interviewed and featured on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So the first question that I have is, when it comes to your background, I see you got your degree in chemistry. What was the motivation to get that degree?
Well, I've always wanted to be a scientist. When I was 4 years old, I told my mother that I was going to be a scientist, actually. But I never actually knew which scientist until I actually got into grade 9. So that would have been when I was doing high school in England at the time, had a really good chemistry teacher. Unfortunately, I never could remember her name. Recognizing that I had good talent in chemistry and I was really interested in that specific area. And then wanting to be a forensic scientist, which I also discovered around the same time, I recognized that it would be good to have a bachelor's degree grounded in a natural science. So I wanted to do my bachelor's degree in chemistry. And afterwards, I went on to do my master's degree in forensic science with a specialization or concentration in trace evidence analysis.
Wow, that's crazy. So so you've been around. So I know, from your accent, you're not from just anywhere. You're from the Caribbean somewhere.
That's right. I'm from a small island called St. Kitts, Twin Island Federation, St. Kitts and Nevis, 2 different islands, 1 country. But that's where I'm from, and I rep for my country all day.
Wow. So you were in St. Kitts, and you ended up in England for high school. And then did you do your high school or did you do your college in England as well?
No, actually. So I finished high school in England, then I did community college in St. Kitts. Then I went to the University of the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands for my bachelor's degree. My master's degree was in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University, Richmond, Virginia.
Wow, you get around, man.
Yeah, man, definitely.
That's great. Yeah, that's excellent. So you've seen the world. I'm sure you got a lot of stamps in your passport.
Oh, for sure. Multiple passports.
Nice. So then, you did mention that you got a master's. Was that part of the plan after getting your bachelor's? And if not, what motivated you to get the master's?
It was definitely part of the plan because I recognized when I was looking into becoming a forensic scientist, I was using resources that were posted on the American Academy of Forensic Sciences website. That's the AAFS. It's the largest professional body of forensic scientists in the world. And they were actually proposing to get, first off a bachelor's degree in a natural science. Then you could go on to a master's degree in forensic science. And they also had a list of schools that were actually accredited by an accrediting agency that's under the AAFS. So I actually knew from the beginning, really, that I wanted to go that particular route, get my bachelor's degree and then go on to get my master's before launching into a career as a professional forensic scientist. And specifically, a master's degree in forensic science would really give you a nice overview of everything that's involved in the forensic sciences, because there's a lot of different areas in the forensic sciences, everything from crime scene investigation to digital evidence to fingerprint examination to DNA analysis, and of course, trace evidence analysis, which is chemistry. So having that broad overview, in addition to having that graduate work as a research scientist in forensic science, I thought that would be really beneficial.
Gotcha.
A 1-year research project that should have been a 2-month research project. So I got accustomed to failure as well, doing a master's degree in forensic science. But what I think was really instrumental for me as well was while I was doing both degrees, I started to recognize that there were 2 particular things that I liked about science. The number one thing was doing science in the lab, And the number two thing was sharing science with the community. So that option and ability to, talk to people about science and do outreach or inreach, really talking to people about the science and what we have discovered and how it can be beneficial for the community. That's really what brought me to being, a public speaker for sure.
Wow, that's great. That's great, Ciaran. You did mention that you got your bachelor's and you got your master's, and that was all part of the plan. Is there such a thing as a PhD in forensic science?
Yes, there is actually. Yes, there is. One of the more famous programs is at FIU, the Florida International University, the International Forensic Research Institute. They actually have a PhD in chemistry with a concentration in forensic science. So a lot of persons go there and you do really good research. I met a number of persons who have graduated from there. One of them was actually from the country of Trinidad and Tobago. He's a chemist who has really been instrumental in researching how you could use really small samples of biological material to do rapid DNA analysis. Because right now, a PCR test, you could do that in 24 hours. Back in the days, it used to be much longer. But, now we're looking at, how can we do rapid PCR really, really fast, like an hour or less. So that's something that he's been working on. So there's definitely persons pursuing PhDs in forensic science. I could imagine there's more than just FIU, but definitely FIU is one program that I know of for sure. It's accredited and definitely has the evidence base to say it's a good program.
Gotcha. So then your work as a forensic scientist, what type of work did you do when you worked as a forensic scientist?
Well, I had the option of working in my small little country of St. Kitts and Nevis. I was really fortunate to be given a position there as the first civilian crime scene investigator. So I started off doing that work. I would go out, get calls about crimes at different locations, and we would try to see if we could find physical evidence that would connect persons to the scene or persons to each other. So persons being suspects or victims, and locations that you could find criminal evidence or find physical evidence of crimes. So I did crime scene investigation for a while. I also went on to do several other things. I did crime scene management. I did fingerprint examination. I did firearms and toolmax examination. And then ultimately, what I think is my crowning achievement as working with the police force in St. Kitts and Nevis, I was actually the first ever manager of the first ever National Forensic Laboratory. So that was in 2018 April. I became the manager there, had a staff of 4 persons who I directed, and we mainly did chemical treatments on different items to find fingerprints. So we did, well over 200 items in my tenure there, and we found well over 500 prints. So we did really well using chemical, physical, and digital methods to develop latent fingerprints on items collected from crime scenes, and also did a number of identifications as well.
Wow, that sounds so cool. And you said you were the first civilian forensic scientist in St. Kitts. Is it before that they were non-civilians?
So I was the first ever civilian crime scene investigator.
Yeah.
I was working with the police, and the police always had persons doing scene investigation, but they were just police officers. So I was the first person who was not a police officer to do that kind of work, at least permanently. So,
okay, gotcha.
I would like to say I broke barriers, definitely, and made history.
Wow, that's great.
In St. Kitts.
That's excellent, man. So then you were okay. So you're working as a forensic scientist. You're the first manager of the lab there in St. Kitts, so, which was quite an achievement. But then you made this transition to develop Sure Science Consulting. What was the reasoning for making that switch?
Well, initially, Sure Science Consulting came out of a friend of mine in my small village in St. Kitts. He actually wanted some help studying chemistry because he wanted to take a high school level really exam. So he wanted some tutoring. So I was like, sure, man, I'll definitely do that for you. And that, I think back, is like services really. How do I get accurate and reliable information that's going to help me, achieve my goals and make better decisions? So that's really what the genesis of Sure Science Consulting was. That was like January 2014. But then over time, I realized that people, they really needed a wide variety of services. And there were so many things, so many skills that I had being a forensic scientist, that would transfer well to helping people do other things. When you're a forensic scientist, you get really good at writing reports. You get really good at finding mistakes in your own work. So I figured I could do that for people. I could write well, definitely along the lines of technical subjects, and I could also edit as well. So those two consulting services I started, trying to shop out myself as a consultant for. And then in terms of speaking, definitely as a forensic scientist, you get accustomed to talking about the science because you need to explain what you're doing and explain your results to detectives, to jurors, judges, lawyers, persons who are not from a scientific background. So, doing that as well, I recognize that, I could really talk to people who are interested in doing this work and let them know what the requirements would be, what the day-to-day achievements or struggles or failures or successes could be as a forensic scientist. So that's where I really started my public speaking aspect of Shore Science Consulting.
Gotcha. And so when it comes to the topics that you speak on, what are your favorite topics to speak on?
I would say my favorite topics to speak on is definitely that, forensic science, because it's such an interesting multidisciplinary field that when you really look at the intersection of justice and science, like it really offers so many different things that we could do, and so many different ways that we could improve what we do on either arm, and being able to be somebody who's multidisciplinary, I think is really important as well, because there's so many issues that we come up with, along as we go through life, so many questions that we have, and sometimes the questions that we have, in order to find accurate and reliable information that would answer our questions, we need to be able to understand the other aspects of these things, such as science. Looking at the COVID-19 pandemic, I always tell people, like, when you see all these decisions being made at the policy level, at the government level, about how we can control public health or how we can implement public health measures, it's all because somebody would have been doing the science. And that's really the aspect that persons who are in government, they need a little bit more clarity on, so that they can make these recommendations in order to really help people make better decisions. So they need accurate and reliable information. So whenever I talk about forensic science, really, I hope that I'm giving people this overview, this idea that science can be used in so many different areas to help us achieve the results that are the best possible results. Help us find accurate and reliable information that will help us make better decisions.
Do you have a favorite audience that you like to speak in front of?
A favorite audience? Yeah, I never thought of that. I like to think of myself as somebody who could handle really diverse audiences, but I've found that the most engaged audience I've ever had was actually these very young children, like, grade 6 to probably grade 4. I did a talk for Club Lab Rascals, very young children, doing science camps. And they had some excellent questions. They really kept me on my toes. So I find that, we need to really talk to young persons, like really, really young, about science, because, they have probably the most questions about how the world works, and they really want to understand, and they're at that age where they can absorb this information really, really well. So you have to be really well prepared when you're going to talk to young children about anything, but definitely.
Excellent. Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. So I have a children's book, and I talk to in front of kids too, going doing school visits. And you're right. They do have some great questions. Oftentimes, even things that you didn't even consider. And
Definitely.
the book that I wrote was based on my nephew asking me a question and me not knowing the answer, and actually having to do some research to find out what it was. And eventually, I want to write more books where that is the premise. My nephew asking me a question and me answering the question based on science. So
Definitely.
I'm really cool. I think it's really cool that you go and speak to young people as well, and you're not worried about I guess the questions that they're going to ask. It just makes you better prepared. It makes you a better speaker.
Certainly does.
Yeah. So when I mentioned also in the intro that you do work for the Canadian Multicultural Inventors Museum, what type of work do you do with them?
Well, the Canadian Multicultural Inventors Museum is headquartered right here in Toronto, in Canada, and it's headed by a really, amazing black man, also from the Caribbean, so happens to be. His name is Francis Jeffers, and he really wants young people to be able to see themselves in the innovation and invention landscape. Because the truth is, there have been persons throughout the entire history of human invention and innovation that have come from all different backgrounds, talking about all different racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, sexual orientations, and also national backgrounds as well. We've had persons, throughout the entire history of human knowledge making that have contributed significantly to advancement of, our societies, and they're from all over the world. Definitely here in the city of Toronto. And we want everybody to know that you can be reflected in the invention and innovation landscape. So we do a lot of presentations and exhibitions. And mainly now what I do is I do presentations, mainly talking about significant African Canadian inventors, persons who have been, doing excellent work that has really changed the world right here in Canada, and that so happen to be Black. And also talk about, my profession of forensic science and the experiences I've had as a forensic scientist, and how my career journey continues to drive me to do, more and more different things with my transferable skills. So that's really the work that I do with CMIM. I also have written some book chapters for an ebook that we have coming out. Again, we're going to be featuring African Canadian inventors and innovators, because once again, we want to be able to target young people, middle schoolers, and let them know this is a resource right here talking about issues in STEM that you can also contribute to, because, persons from all backgrounds, right?
Wow. That's great work that you're speaking about with the Canadian Multicultural Inventors Museum. You're absolutely right. There's a whole lot of work that I'm sure people have done that others have no clue that was done by certain people, and by those bringing that to light. It's only good that can come of that. So I'm glad that
Definitely.
you're doing that type of work. So when it comes to public speaking, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Well, I was definitely not always good at it. And, I'll tell anybody that the only way to really get better is to actually do more of it. I was definitely that person that, always wanted to be the center of attention, but I never really had the words to really, deliver myself well. And it so happens that I think one of the more formative experiences for me as a public speaker was because I was a part of a church group called the Anglican Young People's Association. We were very active at the time, and I was living in St. Kitts and going to community college. And we had so many different activities that, really revolved around people making contributions, and that would be making contributions orally by, standing up and saying, what your ideas were, and being able to support them with evidence, or at the very least, tell people, how you see something going well, for you, what the benefit is for you, for everybody else, what the drawbacks might be of something else. So, we used to do something called impromptu speaking. You had to pick a random topic out of a bag and be able to talk about that for 1 minute. Those are really challenging, but we did that so often. And you realize that, when somebody can wax poetic on a topic, that you really can enamor yourself to an audience. So I figure that that would be the way for me, as somebody who liked to be paid attention to really do well, be able to speak on a topic, especially something that I liked, and let people know that there are interesting ideas out there, interesting perspectives, that they could really benefit from. So it was just a lot of doing that. Definitely when I went to do my bachelor's degree, we had a lot of seminars where us as undergraduate students had to present on different papers. Imaginable, that I got really good at delivering myself, particularly in speaking about scientific concepts. And then, of course, as a forensic scientist, it's really important for you to be a good expert witness, somebody who can go to court and deliver clear testimony that explains the evidence and what it means. So we had to do a lot of practice for that as well during my master's program. And it was, like I said, every single class, you keep on doing these things and getting used to the idea of speaking about your topic of interest and delivering it well to an audience. So that's really how I got good at public speaking.
Nice. Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Definitely get nervous. I'm usually the kind of person that, up until the minute before, I'm all confidence, 100%. What I give yourself space, to rely on things that you already know. Introduce yourself, talk about something that you're really comfortable with, talk about your background, simple things like where you're from, talk about your island, let people know where you're from, who you are, let people know that you like having long hair, let people know, man, I wish I had long hair, just something that really breaks the ice. I think that's really important to have that nice little buffer period, because then you can really relax and get down into your content.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, you know what? This has been really cool talking to you, Ciaran, about your background, about forensic science, about the Sure Science Consulting, about the Canadian Multicultural Inventors Museum. You're a man of many talents. How can people get in touch with you?
Definitely, you could reach me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be as active as possible on LinkedIn. Just search for Ciaran Phillip, Ciaran Phillip. You can also find my company, Sure Science Consulting, on LinkedIn. You could also find it on Facebook as well. So definitely follow me there. I'm on Instagram, RAS_SCIENCE, RAS_science. You can also follow me on Instagram. Really trying to build up my content and let people know the services that I can offer as somebody who has a sophisticated scientific acumen, as well as competent communication capabilities. So, definitely hit me up if you would like to know anything else about Sure Science Consulting and how we valuable information that helps them make better decisions.
Excellent. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. Please check out the what's it called? Teach the Geek to Speak Society. It's my monthly membership. Yes, I do know what my stuff is. You can find out more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Ciaran.
Thanks a lot, Neil.